Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Rebecca Dalmas. Rebecca Dalmas is a consultant for Technotutor. Her mission is to self-empower parents, children, and the community, and to build a strong character in children. This means developing critical and creative thinking skills. Welcome to the podcast, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you for having me, Kimberly. It's awesome to be here.
And you're from the beautiful Massachusetts area.
Yes, I live way out on Cape Cod. It's like living on an island in the middle of the ocean.
Sounds wonderful. So why don't we start out by you telling us a little bit about you, where you started out, where you grew up, and how you got to be where you are today.
In a nutshell, well, my father was a journalist, so there was a lot of language in my home, and I became a very avid reader. I mean, I remember in the third grade, he bought me Stuart Little and Charlotte's Web. And to me, they were treasures. Yes. I just, at that age, I really took off in reading. So I've always read a lot, and I continued to read after college. And it's evidently known that only 10% of college graduates continue to read after college. I was one of those people that kept reading. So I also studied music. I have a BFA in violin performance. I was mostly a chamber orchestra player. So I could sight read music very well. I was pretty highly trained. And the third cultural thing is my mother was a painter. So I know how to draw. I don't do it, but I was trained in that. So it was really a lot of the arts. So in the years of being a professional violinist, mostly performing in small chamber groups, I had some young students that I taught. And what I noticed with them was that when I had structurally set them and they were secure in the mechanisms of the violin, which took a lot of metronome work and breaking things down, when that was set, they would really start to fly. And it's like you could see something in them open up, and they were self-generating and starting to process all the movements and like motivating themselves forward. And it was an awesome thing that I noticed. And I thought, that's really cool. So fast forward, when I was 38, I'm 58 now, my husband suddenly died. And I had a 7 and 9-year-old. So I thought, well, I have to change my life. What else do I love? I thought, I really like those moments with seeing children open up, and I love to read, So I went back to school, and I'm certified in elementary ed, and I have a master's of education in reading. So hence, I went into the classroom, and it was one day in a classroom, my orchestra mind came forward, and I had my degrees, and I'm in this 4th grade class, and I'm looking out at this orchestra, and I'm suddenly like, wait, they don't know the notes. Yet, there's so many behavioral things going on, so many emotional things, and I have to backtrack. At some point, just at the end of my music career, I was made a concert mistress for a small chamber orchestra. And I had the thought, now that I'm here, why did it take so long? I mean, I was so emotional on that journey. Again, it's that same thing of, being secure in the structural means. I could really see what that would do. So I'm in front of this 4th grade class, and I'm like, wait a minute, they don't know the words. I mean, ironically, the reading research stands behind all of this. The better your vocabulary, the better your word recognition skills, the better your reading ability in all areas of your life. So you have to see us like a computer. If your computer is very badly organized, then you're going to have a hard time sorting through everything in the computer, reading what's going on within you, reading what's going on around you, because your desktop is going to be completely filled up. So that's going to make you insecure, because you're going to miss the things the teachers are saying. You're going to be worrying about what your friends think about you. So in the research and reading, children that have a well-developed vocabulary from those first 7 years, those fundamental foundational years, always do better in school. And according to your vocabulary, your relationships last longer, you make more money in your life, and overall, you live longer.
Huh.
So I'm like, wait, the kids don't know the notes. So how can I, if you look at the media today, how can I rebuild these children, getting the words in without pictures, so they have that centered structure, so they can come out like I'd seen in the music. And that led me to Technotutor.
Okay, so why don't you explain a little bit what Technotutor is?
Well, to just be technical about it, it's called an accelerated learning tool, which means you use all your senses to integrate the words. You don't have to think about them. It's like how you tie your shoe. Once you know how to tie your shoe, or once you know how to ride a bike, you know it so well you don't have to think about it. So if you had the opportunity to systematically really practice your words and have clear definitions, you're going to do really well in school. I mean, what does that mean in behavior? I mean, if your child's in class and they come to class and they don't have to think about the language, they're not going to look around the room hoping someone else raises their hand when the teacher asks a question. They're going to hear it, process it effectively. Their hand's going to go right up. They're going to be able to communicate. So that's going to feel good, because you can actually, there's room in your desktop to practice what's being painted abstractly, but also build relationships within that in relation to all your experiences, which is what we all begin to do as we get older, because we start figuring this out. But imagine if you could build in a clear vocabulary from day one. And if we look at it, since, I mean, if only 10% of the population is reading after college, we all need more work on our words. We have to work on our words like a musician works on their notes. So it's an accelerated learning tool that improves your focus. It's like a metronome. You narrow the focus, you integrate the word through accelerated learning, which is all your senses. It goes directly into your long-term memory, and it's stored there like a clean placeholder of information. So then you're allowed, through communication, to structure yourself, which allows your natural presence or spatial ability to really assimilate and associate what's in front of you in practical ways. Is that too much? Am I getting too complicated?
No, what I'm understanding is if you don't know the notes, you definitely can't play a melody. Right. If you don't know the words, then you have no tool to even communicate how you're feeling or thinking, or even if you understand something, and you might not understand what other people are saying.
Yeah, and it inhibits you from conceptualizing effectively. So you're going to have a lot of protective behaviors because you're insecure.
Yeah. And
when you're doing that, you're shutting yourself down with beliefs, and you're not opening up your chest and processing.
Yeah.
That's like what I saw in the children with the music. So it's a tool like sports. They put cones on a field to narrow the focus, to delineate the space, to make it more specific, so you know how to focus and direct yourself. So you practice, directing yourself. So it's kind of an inversion of all this. Technotutor is an accelerated learning tool that's a focus builder that allows families to really structurally build in a good vocabulary.
Wow. So what I'm hearing over and over is that when the person has this skill, then they have, better self-esteem, more confidence. So can you share, I know you've been working with children for years, can you share a story of someone and what changes you saw?
I'll share the story of one of my first clients. The girl was in third grade. She was very verbal, but she wasn't doing very well in school. Very vivacious girl. You would not think that she would have problems with vocabulary, but she wasn't doing well in school. And, you can see So she started using the tool. When I did the presentation with her and her family, she sat there doing it for a while. I was with them for 4 hours. And then suddenly her father had her start up, using the words she'd been practicing. And he saw immediately how secure she was in using the words. And she sits up and she says, Dad, I love this. He's like, why do you love it? She goes, because I get to do it myself. Because the parents can, keep an eye on it all and help build in the behaviors. But so many of our children are so micromanaged. And they actually like these simple things, these simple schedules and things you do a little bit every day that have amazing results. So they bought the tool and I worked with them, and I saw them a year later, and he said, she did great this year. She did so well in school and they were calmer. So there's another client I have. The girl was diagnosed as ADHD. And she wasn't doing well in school, and the behavior at home wasn't too great. So I worked with them for a while. I was told at the end of last summer that she got 100 on every single spelling test except one where she missed one word, and she did it herself.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So
it's an amazing tool. We've had adults use it as well. People that are having to change their line of business, or another client had to face a lot of legal work and in a certain situation, and they all said, if I hadn't had this tool, I wouldn't have made it through.
Wow. So and are the words they're learning, they're just in the basic day-to-day vocabulary that most of people are speaking, or is it specific to different areas?
The tool is organized. It's got K through 12, all grade specific according to our present system. For some people that might know this, you have sight word lists, and every state or every county has a different system. So, here in Massachusetts, I think they use Rebecca Sitten in a lot of places. There's Dolce word lists. So the tool already has all of these loaded into the program, but you can also make your own word lists. So altogether, it has all the K through 12 words you need through the first 3 years of college and beyond. And that's over 20,000 words. It also has Spanish and law and all the science words you need to pass the medical exam for the Harvard medical system.
That is expensive. I've been to medical school. There's a lot of words.
Yeah, well, we go to school and we study these textbooks and we learn these vocabularies, and then we can communicate effectively within them. Mm-hmm. So it would make sense if you really know the vocabulary and you know it so well, like riding a bike or tying your shoes. You don't have to think about it. What is going to happen to your conceptual ability?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when things are automated, so you can actually be using your brain to build things, to create things, to manipulate things, rather than trying to use it to just remember, what did that word mean?
Right,
what are they talking about? We're getting.
And you open up your spatial sense. So your processing just improves exponentially. I like to say, we know that young children have a rapid learning ability. So it's a natural learning ability. Imagine opening that back up.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, that was one of my questions, is that, why don't we just naturally do this? Why don't we just naturally do this?
Right. Well, I think a lot of it, if you want to go a little deeper, and I've looked at this within myself, so I can actually talk about my own personal experiences. Our world, my mother she's 82, and she said, I remember when I was a kid, you only watched the Lawrence Welk show and some other show in the evening. That was the extent of television. Mm-hmm. And my husband's mother, who's in her 90s now, and she's still alive, she remembers having to get up in the morning and walk to get milk and butter. So if you think about the amount of information we're facing today, it's exponential.
Yes.
So we as adults how well do we really know our words? And what are we giving to our children that absorb everything? And then you have this world today where there's exponential amounts of information coming at us. So do we wonder why we have attention disorders? Are we really effectively processing things? So a vocabulary, if anything, is so important today. It structures us and allows us to process things more effectively. And then you build that self-esteem. And then you're not afraid to feel, to try new things.
Mhm.
Yeah. I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it did. And, we have people now who are in public schools, private schools, homeschools. Do you think our education systems are adequate the way they are? And now, really, a lot of homeschools right now. But in
Well,
general, when things are like normal, um, our education systems are children being taught what they need to be taught in school.
I think some of, nothing is ever all bad. I think some of the basics are necessary, but if our parents are from a different generation and if we are not reading with ease, and given that we're in an age of a lot more information coming at us, I think there's a great need for this tool and to understand how important building your vocabulary is in a simple, systematic way. It's something you just do a little bit every day, and it produces a lot of change if you do it consistently. So given that information is changing so quickly and our schools may not be able to teach us, what's being discovered, if you learn that with ease and you've got that vocabulary, conceptually, when that new thing comes along, you're going to be able to meet it with ease. So you'll maintain a kind of changeability that young children have in that rapid learning ability. And the other thing about schools is, they're there to teach a set body of information, the fundamentals, and they do it through thinking, through memory. So they don't really have time to make sure that you understand or that you have or that you've integrated all the words. And if you come in and you don't have a good foundation in the language, you're going to fall behind. And the numbers show this. If you're up into the third grade, you're learning to read. And then there's a switch in reading to learn. So if you're not, fluid within this, you just fall further and further behind. And it's known that when you can't communicate effectively, you get frustrated. We all do. Then you lash out, and then you create problems for yourself that take a long time to sort out. So vocabulary, it's like you are the words you know. It's really important. You have to know the notes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, I know that many teachers in the last few years have been pressured to teach to the test.
Right.
They're just teaching kids to memorize things that after the test they don't remember. It doesn't add to their life. How is, when they use the Technotutor to learn this vocabulary, how is it that it's internalized compared to just memorizing things?
Well, if you're memorizing things, you're constantly thinking, so you don't really have time to conceptualize, really. And it's also the pace at which it moves, because the teacher has to reach to all the different levels, so she may leave some words out, and then you don't have the words or the vocabulary, and the teachers can't make sure you know the words. So you're pushing everything through thinking. I mean, abstracting is not a bad thing, but too much water or too little water is not good for you. It has to be balanced. You need real experiences. So how many of us, like some children will read a lot, but it's all up here. They can't communicate it.
Right.
So accelerated learning is really important to understand, because you're integrating things through the senses. You're speaking the words, you're saying the words, you're writing the words. So that when you see those pictures being painted, you're not having to suddenly move yourself in a way that you've never moved yourself before. You're not only doing it up in your head. So like tying a shoe, when you actually do it, you really know it. So in terms of language, it's really knowing the words. This is a little tricky because we're so used to abstracting only. So that's a tricky point to understand.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You have to experience it. So one of the things we do with Technotutor is always have a presentation where you experience this difference. Because I can talk till we're blue in the face and bring up a lot of research. It's going to go one in one ear and out the other.
But that makes total sense to me, because I know as a child I was very shy, so I didn't talk much.
Right.
I always had a book in my hand, and I had a great vocabulary, but
Right.
I wasn't speaking the vocabulary. I wasn't using the vocabulary.
It was lost in translation from being up in your head to really generating it.
Exactly. So that distinction made perfect sense to me. So, so do you think that doing this would help someone as far as when they're coming out of school and they're deciding on a career? How is this?
Yes, absolutely. We've had in Canada, there was a mature woman who was, I think she was working in finance, and she had to face some lawsuit in relation to her work, and she was very nervous about it. She'd never, I mean, maybe she did a lot of her work with, you know, in the paper world. So she bought Technotutor and integrated, you know, even the language she knew from her profession. And she looked at some emotional things and, you know, how to speak to a judge, and she integrated all these words. These cases, she said, usually go on and drag out for months. She was through everything in the first day. The judge said, you've spoken so clearly and concisely that I believe that you really did what you were supposed to do. At the end of the day, the case was over.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really amazing.
Yeah, it is. And I've worked with children. When I first got the tool, I actually bought it for myself. I didn't think I was going to be involved in it, but I was so excited to go out and work with children because I thought, I know it's there. I know it's there. I know this is going to work. I know this is going to work. And I worked with this one girl that wasn't reading at all. And within a couple of weeks, she just started reading. And it was like a whole world opened up for her.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened with another boy. I consistently proved it to myself before I even thought of, you know, telling other people about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it helps everyone because this exponential information just being thrown at us, we all need to clean up our words and maybe restabilize ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I think I got lost there. What was your question?
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, so how long have you been working with this tool?
It came out publicly in 2013. And so during that time, we've accumulated a lot of testimonials, and we have a parenting group where people that are using the tool can get together and talk about the different ways they're using the tool. So there's a lot of support within this.
Right. Yeah, that's another thing I actually wanted to ask too, is if people wanted to find out about this, where would they go? Would they contact you, or how would they find out about it?
They can contact me in the Northeast. You can also go to Techno, TECHNO/tutor, TUTOR.com. And there's a place there, there's a telephone number you can call, or you can send an email in and request a presentation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's evident that you love working with children, and you love seeing your orchestra light up as they learn the notes. But,
yeah.
Well,
it's cool. It's a cool thing to see. I mean, I liken it to men sometimes. We all know that our male friends and acquaintances can become very agitated, but they can have moments of this calm and where they give really good direction. It's usually when they're calm.
uh-huh.
I think that's, you know, touching into their innocence. And I think our children have that, and it starts to be lost by the third grade. There's a lot of, you know, behaviors that we would rather not deal with. Mm-hmm. So what I say, when you have that calm and that certainty, that grace, that natural grace that we all have and we want to have with the people that we have relationships with, it brings more of that out. It's really
Nice.
cool.
So what gives you personally the most happiness and joy in your life? Besides, I know, helping children.
Let me think of something. I suppose I was chatting with somebody the other day, and we'd been talking quite a bit, and there was a level of mutual understanding. I mean, you can smile, but there's a kind of smile when your cheeks go up and your whole face lights up. And those moments, you know, there's a real connection when you have a real insight, just like, you know, when I see the children and I see that moment where I'm like, what's that? I mean, it's like they're opening up. I think bringing that into the world and, you know, having that life, you know, that joy, that awe, that natural, it's like you're, I guess, reigniting that state of awe that we have as children and that so many of us as adults have kind of lost. Like, where is that? Like, bringing that here is the greatest joy, I think.
Wow. So, and then you have children of your own who are grown. You have grandchildren, children?
I don't have grandchildren yet. I have 2 boys, and they're 26 and 28, and they're both in the New York area right now. They're both doing very well. One chose a very safe path and is doing very well in computer sciences. And my other son took, you know, the family cultural path. They, by 25, they finished a MFA in oil painting. And they were very good at math, and I kept saying to them with each program, you sure you don't want to go do math? You sure you don't want to go do something like this? But since they had gone through and I knew they were going to graduate by 25, I was like, okay, he really wants to do this. Worst case scenario, you know, he could go back to school and do something else. So I let it be. So he's in New York, following that path and doing very well. He's been doing some illustration work for one company. So all's good on that front.
Awesome. So you pivoted from being a violinist, a mom, going into education, reading specialist,
Yeah.
into this new endeavor that mixes. How beautiful is that? How could that ever be designed any better than to be with a musical background and Technotutor that uses like a metronome or, you know, something? It's very musical in a way.
Well, I think words are very musical. And I mean, we all know it. If, as a parent, you have young children, you walk into a room, you assess everybody in the room. You're like listening to a musical sculpture, and you're picking your friends, you know, your comfort zone and what you know. So I always say, yeah, in a way, I'm looking at sound and what it forms. And yeah, I think that's fundamental and very important. Yeah, so I say, yeah, that's my journey. Words and sound. I have the perfect background for it, that's for sure.
Yeah, it couldn't come together any more beautifully. And who would have thought? And I just wanted to emphasize this because, you know, anybody listening, you might think, well, gosh, I'm doing this now, but I really would like to do that over there. And you think, oh, this is really different, or that's a different direction. I'm never going to be able to do that because it's really opposite of this. But I've found in my life, and I'm seeing in your life, that all the pieces start to go together. All the pieces start to go together to become the person that you are.
Right.
Special gift. No one can explain the things you're explaining the way you explain them.
Right.
Because of your background. Even if they had training from the company, no one can explain it because they never felt, unless they're a musician, they haven't felt the music. They haven't had the experience of orchestrating kids, learning their notes.
Right.
You know.
I do want to say it's really interesting if you think about it. Words in a way are things. They're audible, they're auditory, they're tangible, they create forms. I think they fit all the all the things we use. So when people say, well, I'm an auditory learner, or I'm a visual learner, or I'm a tangible, I need to touch things, I'm like, words are all those things. And I think that's why language is a fundamental thing that humans do, because it uses all of those abilities. If anything, if you say you're a visual learner, if you're using words and you're thinking of them as visual things that paint pictures, you're going to improve your auditory ability, or your tangible ability, your sense of touch and presence. It's going to help you in whatever field you're in. And I've seen that happen. We've actually had people use it who do a lot of sports, and they, integrate the words in relation to their sport, and their focus ability improves within the sport.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I was thinking, how does this affect people as far as complex problem solving? Because I know when I see so many people in front of a screen, not out running around playing sports, dancing, or whatever, just not moving, I think to myself, what's going to happen when we're old and these young people are coming up and they have to make complex decisions? How does that help?
That's a really good question. And Ash, I was talking to somebody about that today. They have a 12-year-old they really looked at the screen time, and they found out that she'd been having a lot of screen time. And it's easy with the coronavirus and being shut in to get involved in that. And I thought, well, if you start practicing your words and you're processing language a little bit more, you're improving your processing ability. So then you have to actively incorporate, doing real-time things like taking a drawing class, or, getting an activity. I suggested, get a family activity where you all build a box, even if it's a kit, because you're getting out of that one type of use and focus of your body and going into expanding your space, and focus in another area. Yeah, we need to consciously do that. So is there going to be as much resistance to that kind of change if you're not having to think about your words?
Yeah. And so as we move forward, like you said, we are getting so much information all the time that we have to process every second of the day from everywhere. I mean, I walk into my house, and right now I have adult children and a grandchild living with me. Everybody might have a TV or a phone or an iPad. They're all listening to different things and all this stimulation coming in. So we do need that time to be able to sit and actually physically work on a project, or physically
change up our spatial presence, because we become what we practice. So if a child is spending their developmental years, really looking at a screen all the time, when you ask them to suddenly change that environment and use themselves in a completely different way, they're going to resist. They're not going to be comfortable in that. So we have to actively do things that, change up, have us use our body and change up our presence in the space. But I see improvement in that when you remove that whole language thing, because you're able to communicate, which is already developing a greater fluidity and changeability. Again, it goes back to the desktop, because you're not having to think about the words so much. You can extend your natural presence. Does that make sense?
And that makes sense. I have a granddaughter living with me now, and she's she's like 18 or 19 months. And she's just at the point where she's starting to say words. She says a lot of things that we don't understand, but she's starting to say words and some that we can understand. And you can just see on her face how empowered she feels when she says something and we understand what she said, and how frustrated she is when she says something and we can't figure out what she's trying to say.
Yeah, and yet we become what we practice. So that initial experience is one of pure frustration. One thing I can say, if you go to the Technotutor website, we have Technotutor babies now, and they're learning to speak and read at 18 months. And I think they're a little over 3 now, and they're almost reading at a second grade level. And ironically, we know that the most successful people in the world, let's go to the extreme and look at Elon Musk or Warren Buffett, they could pick up a book at 7 and read about anything.
Yeah.
So if you remove all of that difficulty from a child's life and you do it a little bit every day, starting at 13 months, you are developing a child that will have no fear in terms of learning and communicating.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree? We need more people like that in the world.
We definitely do. Oh, it would make everyone's lives better. The children, the parents, the teachers. It would make everyone's, job easier.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah, it's an awesome tool.
So I have learned so much from, talking to you about this. And any other thoughts on education, what a child needs? You have so much background in this.
Well, one of the things I remember that really surprised me when I guess I had that eureka moment in really looking at how important vocabulary is. One of the things that I asked in the school was, why aren't we doing more vocabulary? And the one, he was a vice principal and a 4th grade teacher, and he'd been doing it for about 30 years. And he just looked at me and he said, vocabulary in the school is the hardest thing to do. It's so hard that everybody avoids it. And I was like, well, wait a minute, how can that be? Mm-hmm. And yet I can understand it because, going back to what I touched on before, teachers, has 15, 16, 20, 25 students in a room. Does she really have time to make sure the children know all the words? She's got to go on to the next lesson, and she, I'm sure she wants to. It's not that she doesn't want to, or it's just they can't. Mm-hmm. So if you think about, you have all these children coming to school and they've got, varying degrees of knowing their vocabulary, which is actually researched. There's a book called it's known as the 30 million word gap. And that's where your low-income children and your blue-collar children, your middle-class children, the difference in the number of words they know is incredible. I mean, if you're in a home and your parents don't really have a big vocabulary and say they're always saying, don't do this, don't do that, which are reprimands instead of giving direction. Mm-hmm. In a low-income home, they'll get, I don't remember the exact numbers, they'll hear, 7 reprimands to every direction, and they're not hearing very much vocabulary. So how is that programming the child in those first 7 years? They have this awe and this desire to understand, and it's constant. They're practicing it being pushed down. And they don't have the means to talk about it. So you go to the other extreme where you've got, let's just use a middle class family, they're hearing 7, directives that affirm the child and maybe 2 or 3 reprimands. So they're naturally going, also to do that, you're going to be hearing a better vocabulary and the home is going to be more stable. So there's going to be a 31 million word gap by the time they get to the 3rd grade.
That's huge.
Yes, it's huge. And I think it's very important to understand, and I think even most of us have had this in our childhood, where, those non-affirmations that, push down, don't question, and that happens 10 times, and we're so exquisite, we learn everything we do, that's that all being pushed down. So it's even known, it's called the 30 million word gap, that it's so important to have the affirmations and hear the language and have the opportunity in real time in order for you to be able to get up and do, and walk out of fears. So the research is fascinating on this. And another thing that's going on is there's the war in, phonics and whole word recognition. And then the thing that came after that, where they use whole language, they mix a lot of these things together. But children, they absorb the language even in the womb, they catch it. The other thing is, when a child, they know that self-discovery is the strongest way to learn. So in just, practicing the words, the children are going to pick up those phonetic patterns. They're going to start seeing the chunking of the words and be able to read the middle syllable in the word if they start practicing them. So it's kind of a mixture of give direction, but let the child discover. But that practice has to be there. So Technotutor, it allows the child to practice the words, say the words, integrate them in the rapid learning ability of accelerated learning using the senses. It offers you to practice the words where there are no pictures, because the word intrinsically is the power. And then you build the association to a living experience. So, and then you're discovering the patterns in the words themselves and how words are used. And you're not having to think about them so much that you can process behaviors better. So it's fascinating how in all the research and reading, it matches how we work. It's really fascinating.
It is really fascinating and beautiful. Thank you so much for explaining that in an actually very clear way. So thank you.
I hope so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing all your knowledge. And I encourage anyone with children, or if you're an adult and this could help you, check out Tech-noTutor and see how it can enhance your life.
Cool.
Yeah, and before we get off, I always ask people this question: what do you allow someone to have the most incredible, magnificent life?
What do I think that would allow someone to have the most incredible, magnificent life? I would say right now, the greatest moments in my life are when I give, and I give unconditionally. For example, I would say, seeing those things open up in a child, it's, that is the value. It's like, I don't need recognition for it, because I enjoy being that myself. And I, to some extent realize, oh my God, where is that? I want to find that. Mm-hmm. And that's the value. So I think the greatest joy is when you see something or you give something that opens the world up, or you open the world up, and then you don't need any validation for it, because you did, it is. So no, it's something you can hold and nobody can take away.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. And thanks for being on the podcast, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Kimberly. It was awesome meeting you.